You choose.
We have wine.
You choose.
Splash of Griser.
Welcome to Lange Winery Tasting Room. I'm Don Lange.
Jesse Lange.
We're tasting through
a couple different wines that are recently released for our wine club and here in the tasting room. So these are pretty much wines that are exclusive here to the TR. Yeah, Pinot Gris and Rosé of Pinot Noir.
Do you want me to pour this out?
Are we pouring both of them right
Well,
now? I mean, double fisting already? That's good.
I love the color of this.
Yeah, it's really pretty, huh? Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Pinot Gris.
Yeah,
You have a long history with Pinot Gris.
I do, some 33 vintages. So I think, this is a great representation of Pinot Gris. It's got the voluptuous mouthfeel to it. Has some interesting and new aromatics, I think, that you can speak to. Generally, over the years, starting in '87, I would ferment this stuff in French oak puncheons, older neutral French oak puncheons, which we've kept around. We have actually still some of the puncheons from the late '80s, right?
We do, yeah. Almost 30 years old nearly.
Yeah, we're using
very neutral.
Yeah, very very neutral. But it's a great vessel for Pinot Gris. It helps maybe even amplify some of those tactile characteristics on the palate of Pinot Gris. But of late, you and Dan, our assistant winemaker, have gotten into the concrete. So I think we should, you should speak about that for a little bit.
Yeah, the Evangeline. So this is kind of the third iteration of Pinot Gris since '87. Don and Wendy have been bottling Classique Pinot Gris, which is predominantly stainless steel. Number of different lots, but a nice snapshot of the Willamette Valley for what we call kind of our Grigio style Pinot Gris. The Reserve Pinot Gris, which we were the fourth producer of Pinot Gris in all of North America, but the very first to make a barrel fermented version. So that's a wine we've done since '87 as well. That's been up until a few years ago. We've had to, up until a few years ago, we could just say it was all neutral barrel fermented 500 liter puncheons, which you guys were the first winemakers domestically in North America to release a barrel fermented Chardonnay. Barrel fermented Pinot Gris. And so that wine tends to have a lot of richness and a lot of vibrancy. But just recently we started to incorporate a little bit more of concrete vessels into our program here.
We called it an egg at first because the first one was in the egg shape, but then you went out and bought some square ones, and now
some cubes.
The cube.
Yeah.
It's a cube. Yes.
So we had to change our story a little bit.
Yeah.
As things evolve, you can't just rely on the same data point or talking points, as it were. Yeah. But yeah, this wine here is the Evangeline. So this is kind of the third Pinot Gris, the newest one to the portfolio. And we wanted to bottle this one separately as a way to kind of capture the essence. The majority of the essence is from concrete. So the majority of this wine was fermented in our concrete egg, which is colored bluegrass, which is kind of an ode to our musical roots here. And most of that is from our Yamhill vineyards, so some of the oldest Pinot Gris vines in the Northwest and in North America that were planted in the mid-'80s. So majority of that comes from the Yamhill vineyard and was fermented in concrete in our concrete egg. So we picked that wine right at about 21.5 bricks. So really brilliant acidity. The pH was just north of 3.0, and the concrete tends to provide a really nice richness without a lot of heaviness or sort of heft. So the wine tends to have really broad mouthfeel, especially on the mid palate. But you can use one thing I like about concrete is you're able to find and pick wines that tend to have that brilliant sort of background and vibrancy, but then it sort of rounds out and gives the wine what I call sort of bandwidth on the mid palate. It just sort of gives this volume without that heaviness or weight, which I find to be really fleeting and a really compelling aspect of the vessel of concrete.
Yeah, I always think of it's like Pinot Gris. You know, it's good to emphasize it's in the Pinot family. You know, and Pinot Noir has that luscious, rich mouthfeel. So, you know, I always wanted to try and accentuate that with Pinot Gris. And you know, when it's grown in the right place and cropped properly, you know, you can really get that. I mean, it's a serious white wine, and you know, that's what we've got going here. It's old vine stuff, and you know, treated with care. But there, you know, this Evangeline, coming from the concrete egg, has you know, flavor and tactile components that you know, traditionally we wouldn't get with the, you know, the puncheons, and you certainly don't get with stainless steel. I mean, the concrete is in fact porous, right, to a certain degree.
Yeah, it's sort of in between French oak and stainless steel in its porosity, and able to you know, have a little bit of air transfer. Nowhere near to the degree of French oak, but certainly way more than stainless steel. So it's a nice kind of middle ground, and it gives us a little bit more of you know, vessel variety to play with, to work with, and to build complexity from the ground up.
Yeah, I think that's working, and also, and you know, I mean, our tasting team our winemaking team seems to think that there's a certain minerality to it that comes from the concrete. There's a taste component that's different. You know, it's like, and you know, we have the good fortune to be able to taste the stuff's coming out of the puncheon, stuff coming out of the concrete egg, and stuff's coming out of stainless steel. You know, and it's different. You know, yeah, there's a different flavor profile, and for me, it's like the big thing is that sort of minerality.
Yeah, this wine has a lot of tropical elements in the aromatics, with beautiful pineapple, sort of passion fruit bouquet. The wine is kind of explosively aromatic, which I find to be really alluring and really intriguing. But the wine still carries that sort of vibrancy all the way through the palate, so that linearity, it still finishes on a high note, finishes with really, I think, kind of refreshing aspects. So, and I think that tension in a wine is something I look for both white and red wines, is that tension between voluptuousness and then sort of linearity and minerality.
Yeah,
just
electricity. Yeah,
electricity. And this wine, I think, really does that well. It's got a tremendous amount of overt fruit, but that's really balanced extremely well by the acid profile.
I like it. I'm reminded of a French wine writer who came through here in the 80s or early 90s and said that my wines were nervous, and I thought, oh geez, you know, I wonder what that means. What does that really mean? And in further conversation, it's sort of that electricity, you know, that's what he was talking about. That was his way of saying it's like, you know, nerve endings, you know, firing, you know, and that's the kind of electricity that we try to get with our wines, and try to, you know, try to maintain the acidity to keep that nervousness up.
Sure.
Without being neurotic. I mean, we don't want to go over to neurotic.
Yeah, don't venture too far that direction. But it's a really small bottling, so this was just about 150 cases of wine, so really small lot, and was a really fun departure or addition to our reserve and classique bottlings, and really fun to explore and sort of capture that essence of the concrete egg. So that's the story behind the Evangeline, which is the beautiful fly on the label there. And so we picked out a new, like all the wines and all the bottlings, a new Atlantic salmon fly to adorn the specific, you know, capture terroir.
Rosé.
Yeah, our 2019 Rosé. Give people, it's our first time really kind of introducing the Rosé bottling on camera. We held off doing Rosé for a long time because it seemed like about a decade ago everybody was getting into the Rosé game. And I wasn't really thrilled with a lot of the products that were out there. It's kind of was like everybody and their brother was making a different rosé from whatever, and as long as it was pink, it was cool. A lot of the wines for me just they didn't seem to really be very evocative. They weren't very compelling. Frankly, I think there was just a lot of plonk on the market, and before we were convinced to make a rosé here for our property and for our brand, I wanted to make sure that it was a wine that was a step up and kind of a cut above from wines that I wasn't really emboldened by, that I've had a lot of. And this wine here is quite a bit different that way. It's 100% Dundee Hills Estate off of the property here, high elevation, all volcanic soils. It's farmed for rosé, so like all of our different blocks, it's very focused on the micro farming. This wine here, the 2019, is actually the predominantly 114 clone, and this site, we actually leave a little bit more shading on the west side here. My crop loads are like right around like 3.5 tons an acre, so we keep that just a little bit higher. We do trim a lot of the wings for this wine, so we keep the quality really good, but I want to raise just a touch on the crop load to sort of lessen the phenolic intensity of the wine. Also, the shading on that west side, we don't pull leaves on the west side at all. It is certainly not in a vintage like 2019. And I think that allows for a little bit more of that richness. You guys can see the color on the wine too. It's a little bit darker in red. I'm sort of part and parcel to that ruby red, that really brilliant ruby red color that looks like a ruby on somebody's finger, and just that gemstone kind of quality. And so this wine was fermented. We soaked on the skins for just about 2 days, and then fermented in tank and stainless steel before taking to French oak puncheons. So this was again in very neutral French oak, 500-liter barrels, and it's still really pretty wine. And I feel like we've certainly started to hit our stride with rosé, and I'd like to think it's kind of, let's say, benchmark bottling, but a cut above most of the wines that are out there.
Yeah, there's certainly a level of complexity, and for me, what we seem to be getting with some regularity, knock on wood, is a sort of an explosive strawberry cherry essence in the bouquet, which is really hard to ignore, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And then there's more complexity on the palate.
Yeah,
and I'd have to hypothesize that this is not a Saignée wine. Right, and that some of the, I think rosé a lot of times is sort of an afterthought wine. Yeah. It's like, well, we did this Saignée, we drained off some juice from this Pinot Noir fermentation, and then we made this pale pink rosé out of it, and it's quaffable and everything, and nobody complains. But I think this has grown and vinified to be exactly what it is.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point too. It's free run juice. It's not Saignée. We grow it and ferment it specifically for this purpose. It's not a byproduct of making another red wine better. Right. And I think that's part of my reaction to all the Blanc stuff that's out there that's pink wine, because a lot of it's just an afterthought, like you said, to make other still wine, red wines better, to concentrate those. And this wine has none of that approach. It's really approach is to make a real classical example of rosé et Pinot Noir.
Nothing wrong with an afterthought. I mean, I've had some myself.
There's a beautiful kind of like range of fruit flavors there. I think it does capture some of the Dundee Hills essence too, where there's brilliant kind of spices, a little bit of clove in the bouquet, and I think a lot of rose petal components too. So that those floral notes for me add range and complexity in the aromatics, and a little bit of the tannin too. We're not afraid for our rosé to have a little bit of structure. Obviously it's rosé, you don't want it to be a heavy grippy tannic wine, but for us, I like to have just a little bit of structure there. I think it adds more versatility for food pairings. Obviously people drink a lot of rosé on its own, which this wine you can certainly do that with, but I do think it has the capacity to be paired with some different foods too. It's pretty.
Yeah, well, it's fun to share these.
Yes.
And just to put one other fine point on this, these are mostly wine club wines. I mean, although the rosé,
it's a little bit of distribution there. This
little
completely,
distribution.
But
yeah. So enjoy.